Hi there, welcome back to Always Discover. I'm bringing the third update for the national student protests to you. What an interesting time to be here in Colombia, and what a monumental time to be here and to witness what's happening. Last time we checked in, I updated you on the protests and the continuation of the national student protest for public education, for funding for public education. I detailed some of the reasons why this is occurring, so if you haven't seen that, go ahead and watch that last video. Link is in the bio. And if you haven't seen the beginning of it, you can watch the first video as well. But essentially where we're at, we are now in the last week of November, and this protest started the first week of October and is still continuing. This time, the mood has shifted quite a bit. The protest has been largely peaceful, and peaceful due to the demands of the students. They wanted to establish a different tone in Colombia based on Colombia's violent history. So the footage that you're about to see is from the protest that occurred on November 15th, and unfortunately did not go as students had hoped.
So you can see, for the third update of the national protest, it's still going on. Thursday class was canceled. They are now marching. We are up in the north of Bogota. We're between the 106th, Calle 106 and Calle 100. And this is the more affluent area of Bogota, and the idea is to shut down the city so people cannot get home and have their voices heard in that way. No fucking way.
¡No les da tristeza al pueblo! ¡Son ustedes!
So we're walking away from the protest now. It got really ugly, and I think we're all pretty shook by what we just witnessed. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty skeptical when I was hearing these stories of the students not provoking anything, but now I just saw firsthand that it was completely and utterly provoked by the police, any sort of violence that has occurred. And that right there was the purest form of aggression I've ever seen cops, police force use on a peaceful protest.
So as you saw, there's a lot of violence, and quite honestly I was there witnessing firsthand. It was a completely peaceful protest. They had the police helicopter intimidating the students, essentially telling them to cease what they were doing. I'm not sure if this was an unauthorized march, and that's why the police had the authority to do what they did. Either way, it took a peaceful situation and escalated to violence, and it was very, very jarring to see firsthand, which leads me to believe, in the last video I talked about a protest that became violent as well. Same situation, they were marching in the more affluent neighborhood, and it seems like it's not unlikely that it was escalated by police. After this protest, the situation on campus became dangerous, and so classes and all activities were canceled the following day. The following week, however, I was back in class Monday and Tuesday, and I was giving classes. Granted, I did not have a lot of students showing up. There was a lot of activity on campus for the movement and mobilization for different marches and protests that they were planning for that week. What was happening that week then is administration staff were only working from 7 till 1, and so the campus was essentially shutting down or becoming very tightly controlled after 1 p.m. out of fear for students and campus personnel. Also, another element to this is that, like I said, this is a national protest. So what actually happened this week was a group of 50 students marched from the Amazon campus to Bogota. Along the way, they stopped in 3 other campuses and picked up another 150 students. They walked over 600 kilometers, about 350 miles, in 13 days in protest of lack of funding for public education and in defense of higher public education. Because of their arrival, another protest was organized for early morning on Wednesday, and the idea was to shut down traffic so that people could not get to work, and therefore big businesses would be losing money, because the only way to have their message heard is to impact money. Following this protest, campus was shut down because there were reports of violence between students and police. There were bricks all over the outside of campus, witnessed by friends and colleagues. One colleague of mine was walking to lunch and experienced the effects of tear gas. So campus was shut down for the rest of the day on Wednesday. The following day on Thursday, another march was organized. Same thing happened. Police were all around the outside of the campus. Police are not actually allowed on campus ever since there was a massacre of students by police there several years ago. If you want to learn more about that, there's a link in bio about what happened with that situation. I'm not going to get into that, but ever since then, police are no longer allowed on campus. But what they still do is students throw bricks and potato bombs, which is essentially, I'm not a chemistry major, but it's essentially a potato wrapped in foil that's pressurized and reacts much like a bomb. Now, it doesn't sound very dangerous, but it is indeed dangerous, and it can kill people. If it lands close enough to you, it can injure you very badly. Molotov cocktails are also being used, so the situation has escalated exponentially and gotten very violent. This prompted the university to suspend all activity until further notice. Now, what are they saying about this? Not surprisingly, they're strongly condemning the violence that's occurring between police and these actors. They're not willing to say that these people are part of the student movement. They're blaming these violent actions on strange community members that aren't part of the student movement. And they sent an email out detailing the response, and essentially what they said is, it's unacceptable that in a country that has suffered long decades of internal conflict and forced displacement, that is now looking to reconstruct its social fabric, must tolerate these new generations being continually prompted to replicate the culture of violence. Interesting wording there by the dean's office, but nonetheless, they are not in support of this. And they go on to say how this type of violence directly conflicts with the peaceful efforts that this whole social movement and student movement, their desire for peaceful and constructive dialogue with government officials, is being completely undermined by these acts of violence. So what that means for me as a professor, it's the same as other students and other types of classes that are going on. Like my partner is in a Spanish class for foreigners that is paid and is separate from the standard tuition of normal traditional students. Even that class has been canceled until further notice because of security concerns for the campus community. Whether that means the semester is canceled or suspended, still not clear, but what is clear at this point is that they will take up classes earlier, much earlier than normal in January. So there you have it, folks, a quick update on the very sobering situation here in Colombia and the national student protest in defense of higher public education. If you are part of the campus community and have different information or more information, please let me know. Hit me up in the comments below. I would love to know your thoughts. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with this situation and want to know more, feel free to ask questions in the comments below. I guess I'd like to put it out to you guys too, a question. What do you think? Do you think the students should continue this fight? Do you think education is a right or is it a privilege? I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this situation and maybe what your situation is in your country. So thank you so much for watching, and for more content like this and travel content, be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you can get the latest updates. Stay curious and always discover. Ciao.